Okay, so hello everyone. Let's wait for a couple of minutes. Is the sound working? Awesome. Okay, so let's start. Last week we have been building a simple web API. It was here in this project called openevents.backend. So we have built a simple API controller which interacted with MongoDB, and there was basic CRUD operations for the events table. I have been using AutoMapper to map my event class, which will be persisted in the database, to the event DTO, which will be returned by the web API. Okay, so the sound can be louder, so I can add some more decibels. Okay, so is it better? So here is the getList function, the get detail by ID. There is some create, update, and delete. There are some to-dos because everything was just a prototype, but today I will be building a front-end part of this application, and I will use .vvm, which is an open source framework for building line of business websites and web applications. It's a framework I have been a part of. Actually, I started development of this framework, and later a lot of other people joined the development. So I will show how to build an admin section, admin portal for this registration system in .vvm. So let's start. So I will need another project. So here is my backend. It exposes the REST API, and I will call openevents.admin, which will be a .vvm application, and it will be the event management user interface for administrators of the registration system. So I will name it openevents.admin, and I'm using this project template. You can get .vvm extension for free from Visual Studio Marketplace. There's also a commercial version with more features, but everything I will show here can be done with the open source framework and the free extension, so nothing special. Openevents.admin, so it sounds correct, and I'm using .NET Core, which is great because .vvm supports both full .NET and .NET Core. Okay, so let's create the application, and here in this window I can specify several commonly used libraries. So I will add Bootstrap, and it also requires jQuery, so jQuery is checked automatically for me, and that's it. I will start with practically empty template. I don't want to generate some sample pages. I don't need anything like that. So let's create empty .vvm project. Okay, so speaking of .vvm, .vvm is basically a C# library or .NET library It's distributed via NuGet. So in the dependencies section in NuGet, I have the .vvm.ASP.NET Core package. It takes a while until the packages are restored, but basically it's a library compatible with ASP.NET Core. So you can use it in a normal ASP.NET application, and also it's a client-side library which enables using MVVM pattern on the client side. So in .vvm I will write my views and view models, and I'm doing this on the server, and .vvm generates the client-side part for me. So if I want to add some interactivity in the page, for example hiding and showing some form fields and things like that, it will be done on the client side, because .vvm can generate these data bindings in JavaScript. So let's see what else I got in the application. So I have the NuGet package with .vvm. There is also Bower JSON, which is used to distribute Bootstrap. So in here I have the Bootstrap distribution, and in .vvm we have a concept of master pages. If you have ever used ASP.NET Web Forms, it's very similar. So I have a master page, which is a template for all pages in the application. So here's the HTML head, body elements, like usual. And on this place, instead of this content placeholder, the content of the actual page that is visited by the user will appear. So if the user wants to open the default HTML page, it is nested in the content placeholder in the master page. So if I add something like div class equals container, open events admin portal, and place the content placeholder inside this div, then everything will be wrapped into this container, and also there will be a common header for all pages in my application, or to be accurate, for all pages that are using this master page as stated based on this view model directive. Okay, so I have some build errors because I haven't compiled the project yet. So I will compile the project, and these squiggles should disappear in a while. Okay, so it's restoring the packages. I think that it takes also some time for the first build. Takes some time because of the Bower, which has to download all the dependencies for Bootstrap. And also thanks to this .vvm startup, which is a configuration of .vvm, it registered a Bootstrap CSS files, and also Bootstrap JavaScript and jQuery here for me in the config.resources section. And the resources define their dependencies. So in the master page, I have requested that I need my resource Bootstrap, and it will render all the scripts and styles I need to be able to use Bootstrap in .vvm. So this is the work of the wizard, which appeared when I have been creating the project. Okay, I can delete this getting started file because we don't need it. And also here's the startup file, which is a startup file for ASP.NET Core. So there's a method configure services we know from the last time, and here .vvm is registered, so it registers all its services in the service collection. And also in the configure method, I'm calling app.use.vvm with this startup class on this path, and it basically registers the .vvm middleware. And the default page for .vvm is default.html. It's configured also here in the routing. I have this default route, which is bound to empty URL, which means it will be my default page on the domain, and it points to the default.html file. I can comment out this auto discover routes strategy because I will be registering my routes manually, not using auto discovery mechanisms. Okay, so let's run this and make sure it works. In my page, I have the this title, and this syntax is data binding, and basically I'm just loading a property from my view model. When I press F12, you can see that I have a view model, which is basically a C# class, and I'm setting the title to some default value, so this hello from.vvn should appear in my app. So let's make a startup project out of this and run it. I will run it. I'm used to run the projects using Ctrl F5, not F5, which means open this thing without attaching the debugger. It's a little bit faster, and I'm only launching debugger when I actually need it. So it's a little bit more practical because I can just edit something in Visual Studio, hit build, and then just alt tab in my browser and refresh the page. So I don't need to wait until the browser starts again and things like that. So this is my dev workflow. Okay, so we will need several pages. The first area which I would like to build is the event list page, and also there will be an event detail page. So let's create a page called event list, and this is my page. .vvm asks me if I want to create a view model for this page, and I want to embed it in master page. So let's place my new page in the master page. So let's say yes, and a new page should be created. Yeah, so I have a new page here, and I can define my content. Also, I will create a event detail page. And also I will embed it in the master page. So this is my event detail. And because I have turned off the auto discover routes strategy, I need to register my routes. So let's do it. Event list. The first parameter is the name of the route. So this is just for me. It's not displayed to the user anywhere. It's just for me, so I will be able to reference the route by its name. For example, if I want to create a link between some events, I will be able to do it. So events, and the event detail, it will be, for example, event / and here I need to specify my parameter. So this is ID, and anything that will be in the URL on this place, I will be able to read this value in my view model and render the appropriate event. So event detail and event list. And because I haven't specified a default value for this parameter, it will be required. And when I want to create a new event, I don't know its ID yet. So let's add a question mark, which means that this parameter is optional, which means that I will use the same page for creating and for editing. For events, it's quite okay because there will be no difference in the UI for creating and editing the events. I will use the same UI at least at the beginning. Maybe later there will be some simplified UI for creating the event, but not right now. So I can do basically I can do this. So this parameter is completely optional. Okay, so now we need to consume our API from this admin app. Last time I have been creating the project called Open Events Backend Client, which generates this Swagger client here. So there is functions called API events, get async, and things like that. So let's use this. It also generates DTO objects for me. So this is in the namespace open events backend client event DTO. So basically, I need to reference this project from this admin app. So I will add reference to my project, which is open events backend client. Okay, so it takes a while until the references are restored, but now it's okay. So this will basically allow me to consume the list of events. So I need to make my API work, which requires to run MongoDB. So I will do the same thing as I have done last time. Let's open program files, MongoDB, server, and bin, and I will open command line here. It's a nice trick. If you type, for example, CMD or PowerShell here, it will open the CMD in this folder, which is a really great feature. So I have the command line opened in this folder. So I can write MongoDB, MongoD, which is MongoDaemon, and it should start my server. And also I can so the server is running, and also I can run Mongo, my client, and say use open events. So I will be able to query my database. Because last time I've removed all the records, so now the database should be empty. But in a few minutes we will have some data there. So I need to run the backend app. So I'll click View and View in Browser, which starts the application on IIS Express on the background. Oh, cannot be found there because there is only the API. So if I run API events, it should return something. I hope, yeah, it returns empty array. So it works, the API works. So it's running here on my IIS Express. I don't need to do anything else. And this is my admin app. So this app will consume this API. So let's start. Okay, so this is the view model of my event list page. And I need to prepare a list of events, so I will be able to render some grid with events. But maybe starting with grid when I don't have any data is not a good idea. So I will get back to this page later. Let's go to event detail. And the good thing about .vvm is the MVVM approach, because the API, for example, when I will try to edit the event, I will get the event DTO object from my API, and this object is not it's not a plain it's not a very simple object with two string properties. There are some collections. There is some hierarchy of other objects. When I look in the event DTO, it's not an easy object. But because of the MVVM, I can use data binding to edit this object. As you can see, the Swagger also generates iNotify property changed. In .vvm, I don't need this. I don't need iNotify property change for anything. But if I use this class from, for example, WPF, it would be great to have this. But in .vvm, you don't need. You can work with plain old CLR objects without this interface. But having it's a great benefit for us. Okay, so let's and you can see there's a collection of dates, of prices, and cancellation policies. So this is also I think I just give this object to my user interface, and basically that's it. the data binding will allow me to edit everything in the object, even including adding or removing dates and prices and these guys in these collections. And after the user is finished with all his edits, and he will click the save button, I will get this object on the server so I can store it, which basically means that I will just do a validation on it and send it to the web API. So it's very simple, even if the object contains collections or other objects, because of the MVVM and the way how .vvm serialize these objects, it will be very easy to edit this object. Okay, so this is my event DTO class. So let's create a property in the view model event DTO from the Open Events Backend Client project, and for example, I will name it item, because I'm sure that in the future we will have more entities like event, for example, registrations or things like that, and maybe I will be able to create a generic view model. So this type could be generic. So not right now, but maybe in the future I will need this. So I will use a generic name item, not event, because later I may save a lot of code by creating generic view model for detail of some entity. And we don't need to initialize it here, but every view model in .vvm can derive from not master page view model, but from .vvm view model base. Master page has also its own view model, but basically there is a base class .vvm view model base, which provides a lot of nice functionality for my view models. So one of this is these methods init, load, and pre-render. If you have been using ASP.NET Web Forms, you will know what this means. But basically, the init method is called at the beginning of the HTTP request. When the server gets the HTTP request, and .vvm looks in the route table and determines which view and which view model will be used to handle this request. And then the init method is called on the view model, so that's your first place where you can do some of your logic. Then there is a load method, and then there is a pre-render method. This pre-render method is typically used for working with data, because when the user clicks the button, this life cycle of init, load, and pre-render is repeated, but between init and load, the data from the client side are populated in your view model. So in the load, you will see the changes the user has made to the objects, and after load, the function that was called from the button, for example, the save event, will be called. So load is before this event, and pre-render is after this event. So when you store the data from to the database and you want to refresh something, you can do this in the pre-render. So in my pre-render, I will do all my logic. And because I want to load the data from the database only when the user is visiting the page for the first time, not when he's clicking the button, and only the first time this life cycle goes through. So I will check if this is a postback or not. If it's a postback, it means that the user clicked some button. So if not context is postback, I will do my loading. So I can say load item, and let's create a method for it. Again, if this is a generic view model, this could be, for example, protected virtual. So any view model which would derive from this generic one will be able to add some additional functionality to the event loading, item loading. Okay, so now I need to access the parameter from my route. In the startup, I have said this page has a parameter called ID, so I need to access it somehow. In .vvm you can just declare a property, call it for example item ID, and use this attribute which is called from route, and specify the name of the route parameter. And because it's optional, I can say int nullable. And it can be private set because I don't want anyone in the page to be able to change this property. Maybe it's not necessary, but it's more safe, because if it's private set, it means that the client can read it, but no one can even if somebody edits the JavaScript view model and tries to change this value, when it's deserialized on the server, the value from the client side is ignored, so nobody will be able to overwrite this value. But I think that .vvm doesn't serialize this thing. I think that this is not necessary. The .vvm handles this by itself, but if somebody removes this attribute in the future, this is a little bit safer. So I can just look at the item ID, and I will see the parameter from my route. So if item ID is null, it's a default value, it's null, so it means that I'm creating a new event because the parameter is not specified. So let's say item equals new event DTO. Maybe we could specify some defaults, for example, title equals new event. Maybe if I look in the class, maybe I don't know if these collections are initialized by default. So let's see if these collections are initialized. I don't think they are. Okay, no, they are not initialized anywhere. So let's initialize them. So dates equals new observable collection of objects. Maybe I could specify also the first date, but let's leave this to the later time. Also prices, and maybe here this is a typo because it should be named prices, but let's change this in the future. And cancellation policies also. That's it basically. So this is the initialization, and if the item ID is specified, we need to load this event from the API. So I will need my API client here. So if I look in the API client, there's a class called API client. It should get the base URL parameter in the constructor. And this is also a great opportunity for me to inject this in the service collection. So anywhere I request API client, I will get it. Also, it's maybe if I have multiple controllers, it would be much better to have a single class for controller. It's about some configuration of the NSWAG. But let's also leave this to a later time, so I can have my prototype ready, because this can be quite easily changed, and because I'm calling everything from C#, I will get compile errors. So there will be no problems, because if the output of Swagger is changed, I can just easily go and fix this on all places in my code. So in the constructor of this view model, I can say that I need an API client. So this is client. So that's my constructor. Maybe let's move it to the top. I think I know that a lot of people want to have properties first, then the constructor. But because the constructor typically sets the private fields, which should be at the beginning, I like to keep these closer. But that's maybe my personal custom or something like that. So here I can say item equals client dot API events get by ID, and this is async, so I need to change my my method to be async. And as you can see, .vvm assumes that you will be using async code here. So in this pre-render is basically it returns tasks, so it's easy for me to say async and here await. And in this case, I just call base pre-render await base pre-render, and here I need to change the signature. Maybe ReSharper will be able to do it. Okay, no, it won't. So let's say async task load item, and here I can use await and load the event by ID, which means item ID, and I've just forgot that I'm using string IDs, not integer IDs. So let's change this to string. It will be much easier. Okay, so it will also be null if the parameters is empty. It will also be null, so this doesn't change. Only the item ID is string. So this should load my event from the API, and also let's prepare a function that will be called from the page, from some save button. So let's create a page called a method called save, and because I will be consuming this API, it will also be async. So let's create async task. Do not use async void here. We should also always use async task, because this is called by .vvm, and .vvm needs to see the task, so it can wait until it's finished. Of course, it will await this task. It won't say thread sleep or something like that, but still it's necessary for .vvm to see when this action is completed. So we need to return task. We shouldn't use async void. And here I would just do some validation, which we can do later. But right now we can just say client.api events put async, and I will specify item ID and also the item, which is my event. And of course I need to await this, and when the event is saved, I should maybe at the beginning I can redirect to event list. So I can say contacts.redirect ReSharper redirect to route and specify the route name. Currently I need to use this route name like here. I should create a list of constants, but a list of constants for every route I have. It's one of the features in the future release of .vvm for Visual Studio. So this file with constants will be generated later. So let's not create it manually, because in a few weeks or months we will get this function for free. So let's wait until this is ready. So this is context redirect to route. It will, but not to detail, it redirect to event list. So this will get me back to the list of events. So this is the view model for my page. And now let's create the page itself. So let's create some title, event detail, and I need to look what's inside my class. But first let's create a form. So in Bootstrap I can say div class equals form, and there is a syntax for all form fields, which is form group. Every form group has its label. Oh, let's create a label, so the event title, and inside of this div I can use text box. I'm not using input elements in HTML here. I'm using .textbox, which is a .vvm control, and I can say text is bind to item.title. And because in all data bindings here, I would have to say item.title. Let's do something else. I can say data context equals item. So in this element where data context is set to item, I can just use title. So let's use title. And because in Bootstrap the text box should have the form control class, so it will look as the text boxes in Bootstrap usually looks like. So this is my first field. The second field will be description, and here I have the IntelliSense, so it's quite convenient. So title is ready. Here's the description, which is also a text box, but I want multiple lines. So let's say type equals multiline, and this will create a multiline, a text area. And what other properties I have here? The registration begin date and registration end date. Currently, I'm not using any set of advanced controls, so I don't have any datetime picker or something like that. I would have this if I install Bootstrap 4.vvm, which I will do later. But now I will use the plain plain.vvm without any extensions. In Bootstrap or in .vvm Business Pack, which are our commercial products, I would have more advanced controls for picking the dates. But now let's use only the basic ones. So registration begin date, so when the registration begins, and also registration end dates. And here I can put two text boxes next to each other because the date would be it doesn't need the full row to use. So let's say div class equals row. Oh, I have managed to switch my keyboard, so that's not what I want. A row, and let's create two columns. So let's say column medium 6. So this is my first column, and this is my last column, the second one, which will hold registration end date. And because I'm using the date, I can say format string, for example, equals G, which is classic .NET format string. So G is a full date, which means it's a short date, which is, for example, 12.5.2016, and also short time, which means hours and minutes. We will see this format in a while when I run this page. Okay, so this is the registration date until which is the registration is open. And now we have all the collections of objects. So we have the date, the cancellation policies, and the prices. Yeah, and sorry, max attendees count. So this is maybe another simple value. So max attendees count. No formatting, but it's integer, so we should do a validation for this. Maximum attendee count, or max attendees maybe. Okay, so this is the basics. I want to do the collection editing right now. So let's start this. I have also already started my page, so I need to build this. And now this is my default page. I don't want it, but I want the event without any value, without any parameters. So it will basically create a new event. So let's see if it works. The first startup is taking some time, and I have forgot to register the API client in the service collection. So that's the cause of this error message. So let's visit this this startup file, and let's say services and it can be singleton because it doesn't have any state. So API client, and I need to provide a factory because I need to specify the URL. New API client, and the base URL should be the URL of my backend. I will hard code it for now because I don't have any configuration installed in my application. I can do this later. So at the beginning, let's use just this. So let's visit the admin side again. So I can copy the address. Okay, so this is the address of the API, and here should be a parameter of service provider. So there is one parameter, and it should return my API client with the correct URL pointing to my API. So that's great. So let's recompile this, and let's start this again. The first request always takes some time. Okay, so let's we can see the form is ready. So we have new event, registration dates, and things like that. Here I cannot see any value because the date is nullable, so currently there's no value. But I can initialize this to some date. For example, I can say max attendee count equals 100. Or 150. Registration begin date equals date time today, and registration end date is, for example, 1 month from today, or 2 months from today. So that's it. Basically, so I'm doing this only for us to see the format of dates, because currently we don't have any date time picker here. Okay, so this is better, and I have the English version of Windows, so this is the American format of dates, including 12 a.m. I could switch this to another format, but right now it's not so important. Okay, so also maximum number of attendees is here. So that's the first part. Now I want to create the other sections with the collections. So I will need to create a tab control. So this will be some basic information tab, and there will be prices, dates, and cancellation policies. Maybe the dates can be on this front screen because there will not be a lot of rows. But the other things like prices and things like that could be on other tabs. So let's create the dates first. I believe there's only 2 values, begin date and end date. So that's easy for us. So let's create an edit interface for this thing. So we will need to render a collection of objects. So we have basically 2 options in .vpm. We can use grid view, which is for a table data. But here I think that better will be repeater, which is just a mechanism which can repeat this HTML template for every item in the collection underneath. So let's say data source equals value dates, and for every date in the collection, it will render this template. So I can specify item template inside. Maybe I don't need to, but I will also specify empty data template, which will be displayed when there's no event dates. No event dates were set. So this will appear when the collection is empty. So let's try this, and this time I don't need to recompile anything because I have been only changing the markup, which can be so this can be done right away without needing to recompile and restart the process. When I change anything in the C#, because this site is hosted on IIS Express, it needs to be restarted, which gives me a lot of time to start. So basically, if you are only changing the markup, you can just go to the browser and refresh, and the changes will appear there immediately. So also we can wrap this into form group, because I want to add some label for it. So let's create a label called dates, or maybe event dates, and so this is in my form group, and I'm missing the last div here. So that's it. And basically it's also 2 dates. So let's use this, and you can see the squiggles because the extension sees that this object inside is not correct, but begin date, end date, this works. So we have also some in the commercial version of the extension, we have the real-time syntax checks, so you can see if you have made a typo in your binding after. It takes a few seconds until it appears, but it's there, so that's better. Okay, so this is for editing the dates, but also I need to be able to remove some dates and add additional days. So let's create this. For example, let's give 5 here and 5, and let's create a button. So we can create a button. So dot link button. Link button is a special kind of button in .vvm, and this button will render as a hyperlink, not as a regular button. I want to put only icon on it, so that's why I'm not using a full button, but just a hyperlink. And if I click this, I want to call some method, for example, remove date. So I can say command, and here I can say remove date, but I'm not right here. My data context is the event date, which doesn't have any remove date methods. So I need to navigate to parent or just to root, because here I'm in the dates, and also here is the data context change. So I would need to go parent. So I can say root, remove date. I don't have any method here right now, but I will add it in a few seconds. And this will need to know which date I'm going to remove. So I'm saying just this. And in .vvm, this underscore is for special variables in the binding. So underscore root will go to the view model of the entire page, and underscore this it's the same as this in C#, the current object which is in the current data context. So this is my button, and inside I say something like span class glyph icon remove. Yeah, so this will render the remove icon. So let's go to the view model. In the commercial version of .vvm, you can press F7 and it will navigate you to the view model. In the free, you need to click in the somewhere here or here. Public remove date, and the parameter is type event date DTO. So let's do this, and I can just say item date remove date. .vvm preserves the identity of this object, because when you click the button, the .vvm will, on the client side, it will just send the information that this button was clicked, but this is evaluated on the server. So he knows that you have been clicking on 5th row in the or 5th item in the collection. So here this will be the exact same object as you are trying to remove from the collection. It's not a copy of this object, it's the same object as it appears in this collection. So this will work. And also I need to create a function called addDate, which will add a new empty row. So item dates add new event date. And later we can do some logic that if you already have some dates there, it can just add one date to the last date you have in the row, because it's probably the next date you will want to use. So this is event detail, and so let's add another button. So here under the repeater, I can add date, and we can say add date, and it doesn't have any parameters, so just calling this way, and basically that's it. So I will be able to add and to remove some dates, and also the dates are nullable, so it's great because I don't have to worry about some validation errors. If it's not a date, it will be null. And of course, I will need to check this information when I'm saving the object, but not right now. So when I refresh this, and I needed to recompile the application because my C# code was changed. So you can see here is addDate, and the font here is quite weird. Oh yeah, I have placed the text inside of this span, which is designed for the icon, so I need to add the text behind it. Okay, so this now the font is correct. So when I click addDate, you can see I have new rows here, and also I can remove the rows even if I type some date inside, for example 1/1/2018. So sorry, the format wasn't exact, so that's now it's why I'm missing the value. Oh, it's strange that I'm missing the values right now. They should be preserved. Maybe it's some other issue. Let's go back to this in the future. Maybe the problem is with the date formats or something like that, or maybe the collection is no, it shouldn't be recreated here. Let's go into this later. The values should be preserved there, but apparently maybe I'm getting some JavaScript issues. I don't know. There are none of them, so it's strange. Okay, I can use I can look in the view model when I click some element in this view. It gets the $0. I'm getting the $0 variable, which I can use. So let's say ko data4, which will show me the Knockout.js view model, which is Knockout is used internally in .vvm. So I can look in the view model of this text box, which is on object. There is a begin date and date, and I can look in the begin date if the value is actually stored there. And yeah, so the format isn't correct because the value is not right there. It's not stored. So that's one thing I will need to look at why the format isn't respected. Yeah, but it looks like an issue with the date format. So maybe if I change the format, it will start working. Okay. Okay, never mind. Let's get to this later. So basically, this is for editing the dates. Yeah. Now I know what's maybe the problem. I'm still using the .vvm 1.1 in .vvm 2.0. This is not necessary, but .vvm 2.0 is right now in beta. So yeah, if I say value type date time, the serialization should work. So that was probably my mistake. I will use this also here. So now that should work. Yeah, okay, so event date, let's add it here. Yeah, and now the value stays here, and if I highlight this element, so $0 is my control, if I say ko data for begin date, yeah, now the value is there. So that's the value type equals date time. That's the property I forgot, because in older versions of .vvm the framework cannot detect the exact type of this expression, so it needs the hints for this. In .vvm 2.0 this won't be necessary. This property will be obsolete because it won't be needed anymore. So now it works. I'm not losing my data from the vModel. Let's continue. Let's work with the prices and also with the cancellation policies. So let's create another section called prices, and so now it's named price, but we will change this later. Begin date and date is here too, because the price is valid from some date to some other date. But yeah, event price DTO. So we have begin date and date. We need the price and currency code, and also a title and description of the package. So I think this is a little bit more complicated. So let's make a prototype and then we will clean up the UI. So the first thing can be the title and description, which can be here in the first place. So we have title and description. Then we will have the dates from which the price is valid, and also we will need the price and currency code. So this will be number and this will be the price. I can use the math format N2, which is the number with 2 decimal places, and currency code, it's basically a string, or I can have some predefined currency codes, but for now let's keep this as string, so I can use any currency code. And here I will call remove price. Here I don't need the second button for deleting. Begin date and date, this will be the same. So this is the remove, and here no prices were set, and this will be add price and price. Okay, so this is for prices. So let's copy these methods. Maybe I will change their order and just change them to prices. So it will be very simple. Remove price, event price DTO, and event price DTO. And for example, I can specify some defaults. So for example, the begin date can be the item registration begin date by default. End date can be item registration end date, so the price will be valid for the entire period of registration. I believe that this is the default behavior. The currency code, for example, I'm in Europe, so it can be euro or CZK or something like that, but it's not important right now. This will go to the configuration at a later time. So this is the defaults for my prices. So let's try it. It shouldn't be very complicated from the rest of the page, because it's the same as editing of the dates. Okay, so at price, title, description, the price itself, and some dates. Okay, so that's the prices. Maybe we can change the structure like this. I don't like these form groups for the entire section, so let's make form group out of this. And here I can change the label to H3, basically the heading. And here let's do the same thing, so this can be H3, so it's some kind of title. And instead of row, I can use the form group here, and also I would like to add this label here, so I can say price, because it was missing the information what this field what this field means. So let's do this. So this will be the row. This will also be the row. And I'm using the labels, so the price will be here. This is the prices. I can maybe put HR here to separate these sections. So let's try this. Maybe this will look a little bit better. Okay, yeah, so we have the rules here. So here are the dates. Yeah, so that works. And also the prices. So yeah, I have the price section here. So title, description, price, and this is not price, this is the dates. So maybe validity. Okay. Okay, so this is the options for prices. So these dates are the same. So that's great. I can remove this. Maybe I could remove this on other place, but it's not important right now. Let's play with the UI later. And here I can say another rule, and let's do the cancellation policies, which will be also very similar. So the cancellation policies, these don't have any title. It's just a percentage and cancellation fee %. So cancellation fee, and let's type % next to the form field. Maybe I could use the Bootstrap calls this input group, but let's do this later. And remove cancellation policy, and the dates are the same, and no cancellation policies were set. Add cancellation policy, add cancellation policy. So let's add the last two methods here. So add cancellation policy, cancellation policies, event cancellation policy DTO and remove cancellation policy, which will go here and here. This will go here, and date is not a good name for this, so let's say policy, and here let's say price, or I could just say item, but never mind, it's not important. Okay, so now I have the last section. Let's wait until this refreshes. Okay, I have a question in the chat. Is there any way to debug generated Knockout.js code, or is it minimized without source maps? Oh, so let's see what happens. Okay, I will need to put this to separate window. If you look what files .vvm uses, I'm using Knockout.js, and it's minified, but I believe there is a source map link at the end. Okay, I should have to. Oh no, it's not here, but it's possible to configure .vvm to use a full version of Knockout.js, so you don't need to use the minified version. It's default because it's much smaller, but it's possible to configure the resource. I can show it. So here the configure resources, I can say config resources, and here is the resource called knockout, and I can oh sorry, there is no indexer, there is something like find resource, so I can find the resource, and basically I know that this is a script resource. Oh, what, I have pressed this, and I can just say location and use my own version of Knockout.js. So if you specify the full version of Knockout.js, it will be used instead of the default one, which is embedded in .vvm NuGet package. And I believe that in .vvm 2.0, if you are in the debug mode, then a non-minified version of Knockout is provided by default, and if you turn the release mode on, you will get the minified version. So because right now I'm running on 1.1. Okay, not the Knockout.js library itself, but the generated JavaScript code from .vvm. Okay, so that's also a thing we can look at. If you look in the page, let's see, for example, for some form fields, you can see that, for example, the repeater is rendered to div data bind for each, blah blah blah. And if you want to see the button, well, I have some buttons right here. Oh, there is the add date button. So this is generated from .vvm. .vvm doesn't generate any other code because it just serialized the C# view model in JSON. So this is the view model. This is the client side version of the view model, and you can interact with it using classic Knockout.js approach. So you can say ko data for and specify any element in the page, for example, document, body, and you will get the view model for the entire page. And I can see item, which is the same as I have in C#. So this is the details of my item: cancellation policies, date, description, ID, price, title. Yeah, that's the same. Yeah. Basically, yeah, it uses the data bind syntax of Knockout.js, so it's not anything obtrusive. The only thing that is added here is something like window.vvm equals new.vvm, and then .vvm init is called, and that's basically it. Yeah, you're welcome. Ask anytime if you have any other questions. Okay, so this is the cancellation policy. Oh, let's refresh the page. Maybe it's broken because of the DevTools. Yeah, it looks like the application starts again. Okay, so this is my fee, and these are the dates of the cancellation, which cancellation period. Okay, so the last thing we need to add the save button. So I will create another div in the page and use .button text equals save, and when I click it, I will call the save method, and also I can create cancel, but I don't want I don't want this to be a button which will do post back to the server. It can be just a link because I need to get to the event list page. So let's say .route link, and here I can say route name, and I can say event list, so it will generate a link to the event list route for me. So let's say text equals cancel, and I can use some bootstrap classes like btn default, and here I can say btn primary, so the save button will be it will use the blue color. Yeah, so this is the main one. So this will save my event. The collections are empty and I don't have any validation here, so when I click save, it should call the REST API. Okay, the ID cannot be null. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's my mistake, because I'm calling the put method, and I shouldn't. I should have a condition here. If I'm creating a new record, I should call the post method, and here I should, so if it's a new event, I should use the post method. So there is no ID, I'm just passing the event object, and the ID will be assigned automatically. And if I'm editing, I will use the put method. So this should work now. So let's recompile. And okay, so that's it. So when I hit save, it should go to my API. Okay, so HTTP status code is 404, which means I have something bad in my API or in my Swagger maybe. So let's see what happens here. Okay, so let's look at the API first. This controller, there is a post method which is called create. This should be in the body, and the method should be API events. Okay, so let's see what's generated in the client. So let's say API events post async. It uses API events, and now I'm posting my event, and I've got 404. Okay, let's put a breakpoint here, and let's start the debugger. We will see what happens. I hope that my API is still running. Yeah, it appears, it looks like it's running. So let's try to save this, and it should stop in my client. Oh, debug debugger is not attached. It's strange. Oh yeah, it takes a few seconds before it loads. Okay, but nothing here. So let's click the save button again. API events post async should be the correct method to. Oh, now it's here. So let's see. Okay, that's my 2 clicks. So this is the other one. So this is the base URL, and I'm adding API events, so the URL should be correct. Let's compose the message. So let's try to serialize event data, which is my object. It should work. Okay, so content type application JSON. Looks like this is correct. Method is post. Request URI. The URI is correct, so let's get sent async. Okay, and the status is not. Okay, I'm waiting just for response headers. Content length 0. Status is 404. Not found. This is the headers. Our response is empty. Okay, that's great. Okay, so this looks like the problem at the API side. Okay, so let's try to debug the API. If this URI is even triggered. So let's see if we get to here. Oh, it looks like I have 2 requests here, and they failed. Okay, so it's nice that Visual Studio can see that this function was called by 2 requests, so that's great. Maybe this is the problem with the Mongo. So let's start this side with debugger. So let's debug this, and let's view this in the browser, because I think that when I oh no, it's running, so that's great. So let's debug the API. It's still starting. Okay, so oh no, this is the admin portal. I thought I started the backend debugger because it's not attached. Okay, so let's try this. Let's say set a startup project, and let's debug this API. Maybe the Visual Studio attached the debugger to another project. Yeah, now it seems to be attached. So let's click the save button again. I hope that my admin thing is still running. Yeah, so 404, which means that even I haven't hit the API, and I think that the problem is that I have used the wrong base URI here, because I'm pinging my own site, the admin portal, not this one. This will be, I think this will be the issue. So let's check it out. Startup, yeah, of course, I have the bad port here. Okay, so it will, I hope the communication will work much better when I have actually the correct URL. So this still runs, this also still runs. So let's go back to my admin app. Okay, interesting discussion. Okay, so I need to restart the app. Okay, so that should be that. Oh, still the same error. Oh, I have some, yeah, it's still running, so it couldn't be compiled. So let's stop this site and stop. Okay, so this, yeah, the backend is still running. Oh no, backend just crashed. I should get rid of the IIS Express. Okay, so this is my backend again, and this is my admin, which I need to run. Okay, so now the API seems that it's running, and this admin app, yeah, now it's running too. So when I hit save, okay, I have been redirected to my event list page, so it's great, and it looks like everything worked correctly. So let's see what db.events actually has. And sorry, find. And yeah, we can see that my event is stored in MongoDB, so that's great. Now let's create a list of all events in the system. So I'm going to, yes, Marian says that he hates the new browser window for JS debugging in Visual Studio. Yeah, it delays the start of the browser for a few seconds. That's also one of the reasons why most of the time I'm trying not to use the debugger until I really need it, because it's much faster to start. And also I've noticed that IIS Express delays the startup of the project quite a lot. So maybe if I switch if I can reconfigure to use not IIS Express, but to run this application in .NET Core, and it should be much faster. So I can try this in the future. Yeah, we can turn this off, tools options, and yeah, enable JavaScript debugging for Chrome and IE, or just use Firefox or something like that. Okay, no thanks, it's a good idea. Okay, so now the event list page. In the view model, I need to have the collection of my events. So for example, list of event DTO. And because this can also be generic in the future, let's name it items. And in the prerender method, we can just load this from the API. I will also need the API client, so I will have it injected from the constructor API client and generate field for it. So now I can say await items equals await client API events get async. This is not the best thing I could do because there is no paging, and also this returns an observable collection. So let's use observable collection instead of list. But because this wouldn't support any kind of sorting and paging and things like that, so we need to upgrade the to upgrade and we have to have await here. So API events get async. There's no place for paging and sorting right now, but I should add parameters to say something like page size and page index, or maybe the sort options to provide the ability to do the sorting and paging. I can do this also later. Right now, because there will be only a couple of events. Okay, so this is loading the items collection, and now it's quite easy to create a grid. So event list, data source will be items, and I can, inside of the grid view, I can specify the columns and also the empty data template. So I can say empty data template, for example, no events have no events have been created yet. And in the columns section, I can specify a list of my columns. Grid view text column. I don't know what the IntelliSense, why it doesn't give me the list of types of columns, but it's grid view text column. So the first one will be title, and value binding is a binding which represents the title property. I won't need a description because it might be too long for me, but what I would need to know is the registration begin date and registration end date. So registration begin date will be registration begin date, and I will use the format string D, which is the date only. I don't need to know the exact time. This is for the detail screen. Registration end, so also registration end date. And basically that's it. Maybe I could adjust the API to return different kind of object, not because currently it returns the entire DTO with all the information about events which I maybe don't need. So in the future I could adjust the API to provide me more information, like the number of registered users, which could be in a completely different table, or also the price levels, or if this event is paid or not. So that's also that needs the evolving of the API. Right now I want to keep it very simple because it's just a demo project for some of the features of .vm and Mongo and things like that. So right now I want to make this very simple. So that's it. Also, for example, max number of attendees or max attendees. Max attendee count. And also I will need to create edit buttons and things like that. So grid view template column. Sorry for the problems with the IntelliSense. I have some internal build of .vm extension, so that's not a production version. I'm sure that it works in the production version. And I need to create a button, so let's create a link button again. Or sorry, a route link. Oh, so happy that you have chosen the declarative way of UI definition. Yeah, I really like it too. So route link, and let's go to the event detail page. And because I need to specify the ID of the event, I can say something like param ID and say binding to value ID. So the ID will be placed in the URL on the correct place, and the link will be generated. And inside I can also say span class equals glyph icon pencil, which is edit, I believe. And also we can create a delete button, which will not be a link, it will be a real button. So let's say link button. And when I click it, I can say command, and on the root view model, not on the current item, let's say remove item, or maybe delete item, and I will say this, or I can say just ID, maybe the ID is enough. And it would be a problem if I click this icon by accident, because it would really delete this. So I can say update postback handlers, and I can add a postback handler dot confirm postback handler. Again, the problem with IntelliSense, but now it works. So message, do you really want to delete this event? And this postback handler, it's a .vvm mechanism of intercepting the postbacks. So this will display the JavaScript confirm window, and if I say cancel, it will cancel the postback, so it will not go to the server. So it's great. And of course you can write your own postback handlers. I can show this in the in one of the next videos. So this would be also quite useful, because this generates the ugly JavaScript confirm window, and if you use it too often, the browser will allow you to block this. So it's not a great way to make UI, but for now it's enough. So this should be my basic list of events screen. So let's check it out. Okay, I have forgot to create the delete item function. It happens to me all the time. Okay, the question: is there any big web that is written in .vvm? Yes and no. We have a lot of public facing websites, but I don't know what means big. I don't think they are big enough. For example, .vvm.com is written in .vvm, and a lot of other sites. And in our company, we are using .vvm for really large internal applications for our customers. So these are the applications with hundreds of screens. So I think it's quite big enough. Because typically .vvm is great in line of business applications with these forms and grids and things like that. For public facing websites, it's there's not much value unless you are creating some public facing forms app. But if you are just making your own personal page, then probably .vvm doesn't have any benefits for you. But for large systems, for internal line of business applications, this is great, and we have delivered a lot of applications with hundreds of screens to our customers. So and also because we built these applications, it gives us a lot of feedback for building and extending .vvm. So all new versions of .vvm are inspired by this. Yeah, basically, yes, you can write anything in .vvm. There are no limits or any, because it's just a wrapper over Knockout.js and .NET on the server. So you can write any web application with this. Of course, there are some applications where .vvm helps a lot. There are some applications where .vvm kind of complicates the things because it doesn't render the exactly HTML you really need. But still, any application can be written in .vvm. And also, because it's only a .NET Core library, you can also combine .vvm with other libraries. So I can install also Microsoft ASP.NET Core MVC, and it's also a common situation. For example, if you are building some e-commerce site where you have a public-facing list of products and things like that, you can do this in MVC. And also there's some admin portal or things like that, and it can be in the same application, and you can write some pages in .vvm because for complicated forms and grids, the .vvm is quite easy to use. And for the public things, you can use MVC. So it can be combined in one application, or of course you can write two applications for each purpose. It depends. It really depends on you. But basically you can do anything with .vvm, and if there is not a control which you need, you can just use Knockout.js syntax. You can, in the page, you can say div, data bind, and do anything like you would do if in Knockout.js. So that's also a way how to extend .vvm if there is something missing for you. Okay, so let's try the page. Let's write the delete item function, and it should be async because the API is async. So delete item, and it needs the ID. And let's say await client API events by EID delete. The naming is weird. The names what Swagger generates, it's composed from URL, so it's API events by ID delete async. It's crazy. It can be rewritten in the configuration, which I may do someday. Another thing in .vvm is the lifecycle. I have been talking about it. So there is init, load, and pre-render. And because pre-render is executed after delete item, so when I delete the item, the grid view will be refreshed automatically. Yeah. So when I hit delete, it will be refreshed immediately, because the pre-render is called also in the postbacks, and I haven't say if context is postback equals false, so this will execute every single time. So let's refresh this page, and now I have all the functions I'm referencing from the view, so that should work. And I forgot to add some CSS classes. So the grid view should have something like table bordered. And now it looks like a real table. So here is the title, begin, end date, list of attendees. This goes to the event / and the ID of the event. So it loads information about my event. So let's change something, and maybe let's add some event date. So registration ends on the 18th February. So for example, 19th February at 9 a.m. the event starts, and it ends at 5 p.m. for example. So let's save this, and you can see that this is changed. And when I return back, I have the event dates right here, because I'm just taking the object, serialize it, store it in Mongo, and then retrieve it from Mongo with all the collections and all the objects. So I don't need to mess with the SQL tables and the relations and foreign keys and things like that, migrations. The Mongo doesn't have any schema. You can pass any kinds of objects right in there, and you will receive the exact document which you have stored there. So this is quite easy. I'm also having the API, so if you want to consume or create events automatically, you can integrate with this API. Also, there's a lot of things with validation and things like that. And also, next time I would like to show how .vvm controls can make your life easier. So next time I will do the same thing, but I will show the bootstrap controls for .vvm, because a lot of code I had to write is much simpler with these controls. So, for example, we have a nice syntax for building forms. If you look in the form, you can just say BS form, and you can say form group and text box, and there's also a control called text box form group, so you can basically make this on one line. We don't have this in the documentation yet, but it's there. So that's what I would like to show next time. But basically, even if you don't have these commercial controls, you can do practically everything in .vvm. It only depends on what you really need and how much time you want to spend with these things. Okay, another discussion. So basic knowledge of Knockout.js is recommended. Yes, actually you don't need it, even if you, because as you have noticed, I haven't write a single line of JavaScript. But knowing JavaScript and being able to debug it, it helps a lot, because I've run into the issue with the dates, and in a few minutes I have been able to figure out what's going on. If I don't know JavaScript, it will be much more difficult if I run into any problems. And also, if you want to extend the framework, write your custom controls, then knowing Knockout.js is really necessary. So you can start without knowing JavaScript, and you don't need to learn a lot of JavaScript, because Knockout is still very easy to use and very easy to learn. It doesn't have any dependencies. For example, if you want to work with Angular, you would need to learn an NPM, you would need to learn required.js or how to do modules in JavaScript, and a lot of other things, how to do dependency injection, and if you use React, you will need to know how to make immutable objects in JavaScript. So there's a lot of other dependencies. It's not only about learning the language and the debugger. There's a lot more. Knockout is still much more simple, because it's one library with no other dependencies. So to understand the concepts of Knockout.js is quite easy, and I think that this can be learned in several weeks, and it will help you a lot when you will be playing with .vvm. I think that there's a lot of things you can do in .vvm without even knowing JavaScript, but of course the JavaScript will help you a lot. So that's maybe some kind of conclusion. So let's also try deleting the events. So yeah, you can see the postback handler. So I'm seeing the classic JavaScript confirm. If I click cancel, nothing happens. The postback is dismissed. And if I confirm this, I will delete. It will delete the page. And also there's a bug if the empty data template apparently doesn't show when the page is already loaded, but when I refresh the page, it's there. I think this should be fixed in the next release of .vvm 1.1.8 because we have already fixed this, but it's not released yet. So after we release the next version, it will be right there. Okay, so that's the basics of how you can create a simple CRUD workflow with .vvm. Also, I'm missing the create event button, so that's the last thing I will do. I will create another route link. Text equals create event, and route name equals event list detail, and no ID, which means it will be a new event. And inside I can also place the same thing I had in the detail, so not at cancellation policy but at event. Also, so I don't need the text here, and I can style this as a button, so I can say class equals button btn primary. Okay, so that's it. No changes in C#, so we can refresh this, and I have the add event or maybe new event. It will be some new event, and I'm getting a form with new event, so that's great. Okay, someone tried to use .vvm to any kind of block web, for example. All samples are just form pages. Okay, you can look at for example, on our website we have a simple block, but that's an example of the web page or web app where .vvm doesn't help you really much, because you are just rendering some pieces of HTML which can be used. You can use Razor Pages for this, which is even easier. You don't need Knockout.js, you don't need any JavaScript for this. But when you start adding comments or some interactivity to the articles, maybe then you will use some features of .vvm. But the key point is that you can use .vvm for the form pages and have MVC in the same application and use MVC for the other pages. So you can choose which technology you want to use. So, but this is the URL of .vvm block. It's part of .vvm.com, which is written in .vvm. So you can look how this works. I think that it can be made much better. I don't think the blog is a perfect example of how blog site could be written in .vvm. I guess there will be some unnecessary data rendered and things like that, but it's possible to create a blog page. But basically, I think that .vvm helps the most in these forms, because no matter how complex your object is, you can quite easily build UI for it, for editing this object, and you will get this object on the server, so you can work with it, and you don't need to persist your state and things like that. You don't need to do anything special with this. Okay, how big is necessary boilerplate regarding .vvm? Is it hard to make work JavaScript components for .vvm? Okay, so yeah, knowledge-based company pages with multiple users, not just single user block. Oh, we don't have any kind of application like that. I don't think it would be very difficult to create, but right now we don't have anything to show like this. Maybe some kind of CMS or something like that. So how to, for example, how to wrap standard jQuery datetime picker? Yeah, update state and date change component. That's a great example. Actually, in the documentation we have a sample in the control development section, adding interactivity using custom knockout binding handlers. So if you want to integrate just a datetime picker and do nothing else with it, just to use it once in the page, you can do it as you would do it in the plain jQuery. For example, input type text, and you can select it using jQuery and say date picker. That's it, boom. But if you want to, for example, this control to work in datetime picker, in a repeater, because a repeater can create it multiple times on the page, then you need to wrap it using knockout binding handler. So you need to render something like this: input type text, data bind, and this is your custom knockout binding handler, and this is an expression which references some property in the view model. Yeah, so this is the datetime property which you will bind to. And the binding handler is written something like this. So it's an object in JavaScript. It has init and update functions. And in init, you will just create the datetime picker. So that's it. You can specify the format and things like that. And you will subscribe to all events. So if the user changes the date in the calendar, you will get the change date event. So this will be called. And also if he types in the field and then the field loses the focus, then also you need to update the value in the view model. And you will have the value accessor. It will give you the property in the view model. So if it's observable, it's a knockout mechanism of working with values and notifying that the value changed. So if it's observable, you can update the property with the new value, with the new date. So that's it. And also there is the update, which is called whenever the value is changed from some other place, not by you, but from some other place. For example, if you click a button and on the server you will set some new date in the property. So your update will be called, and you need to update the control. So if it's not a date, you will just create convert it to date, and you will see something like jQuery element, datetime picker, set value, and you will set a new date, which will update the control. So this is the knockout binding handler. It looks quite complicated, but the scheme is always the same. You will initialize your control, listen to the events where the value changes, and here this is the opposite way, when somebody else changes the value and you need to update the control. So yeah, that's basically the date changed and update state. So that's the way how you write the knockout binding handlers. And because knockout handles this automatically, so if you use this in a repeater and a new row will appear, this init will be called, so it will work, and you don't need to use any IDs because you will get the element here, so you don't need to have some unique IDs and things like that. It's quite easy. And the last thing, if you want to use something like my control or my datetime picker, date equals and value binding in .vvm, you can write a C# class which defines, which will render this HTML and will behave like a .vvm control. So you will need to, it's here in the previous article, you will need, for example, to create a class which derives from something like HTML control, and it will render an input element, input type text, and things like that. And you can also render, for example, the binding. So, for example, you can say writer at knockout data bind, and this will be your binding handler, and this will be the property with the date time you want to render. So it will generate the data bind for you automatically. You just specify the name of the binding handler and the value. If you want to see this in action, there is another repo. We have .vvm contrib. I will also post a link here in the chat. And this is a set of community controls. And for example, we have a CK editor. It's the WYSIWYG editor for editing something like rich text box. And you can use it like this. So CK editor minimal and bind the HTML. And if you look in the source code, the schema is still the same. This is the control. So here is the script. And also there is a binding handler. And there is also init function. So we will create the setup CK editor on this element and subscribe to some changes. and if somebody changes something, then this event handler is called, and I will update the property. And also here, when somebody on the server changes the value, I'm also editing this thing. And to be able to use this from C#, I have the CK editor minimal class. So it will render text area. Here is the property. This is a C# property, and this is a descriptor. It's something like dependency properties in WPF, because we need to store data bindings in the properties, so we can not just have public string HTML get set. We have to have some infrastructure around this. And in this function, you will see that we will render some knockout data binding group. So we will add HTML equals this property, and it will convert the data binding from the .vvm syntax to JavaScript, so it can be consumed by Knockout.js. And that's it. And also the control can require some dependencies, some scripts in the page. So you can say that if this control is added to the page, you will need to include this script and this script. Yeah, and these are configured in .vvm startup, so the framework knows the paths, and it will include these scripts automatically for you in the page. So that's how the controls are written. If you want to use the control on one place in the application, you don't need to bother with knockout binding handlers. But if you want to make the control really reusable and use it in 1,000 places in your app, or to use it in several applications, then I think it's worth to create a knockout binding handler for it. And maybe you can package this control as a NuGet package, so you can distribute this, version it, and use in multiple applications. So I think that's a great advantage. And the scripts and all resources which the control needs can be bundled as embedded resources in the DLL, and the framework will allow you to consume those. Because you can also look in the .vvm contrib repo, because every control here, it has its own NuGet package. Is there a way to generate Knockout.js stuff in it update, or do you write it per every specific example? Okay, I just copy the last knockout binding handler and I just update this, because I think it's the easiest method. Maybe if you look in the Knockout.js documentation, Knockout.js.com, there is a section about how the binding handlers work, so you can look here, and basically this is the template for the binding handler, and some of them are very, very short, just few lines in it and something in update. Sometimes it's quite complicated. It depends on how the control is written and how its API looks like, but basically you can write this. If you want to in the .vvm contrib repo, we have also one nice thing. We have a template for the controls, which include the control, some sample web app where you can test the control, and also a project for Selenium tests. So all the controls in .vvm contrib have Selenium tests, and you can borrow this template and use it for your own project. So basically, if you want to create your own control, you can just write something like .NET new .vvm contrib, and it will create a structure of these 3 projects, and you can just easily generate a NuGet package, publish it into your NuGet feed and things like that. So it's prepared for bigger scenarios, for bigger applications. And also on NuGet you can find these controls. So if you want to use, for example, the CK editor, as I have showed, you can quite easily, because if you look at .vvm contrib, and every control has its package, so it's quite easy to use it in the project. You can just install the package and you have the control. So you can create, if you want to build something bigger, you can create a set of your controls and distribute it as NuGet packages. Okay, so I've been speaking for more than 2 hours. And I think this session is starting to be quite long. So thanks for your attention. I hope that you like the stuff I have been showing, and I will continue with live streaming someday after Christmas, so maybe at the end of next week, next Thursday, Friday, or something like that. So if you like these videos, or if you have any feedback, ideas, suggestions, what I should do or what I shouldn't do, feel free to contact me on Twitter or on another channel. My Twitter is here, and also we have released .vvm 2.0 beta today, so if you want to try .vvm, you can start with 2.0 beta, or you can just use 1.1. In 2.0 we have a lot of nice features, and but you can use the 2.0 and give us the feedback, because we really need it. So thanks, and see you next time.